Money Heist fans will be shocked to find out that two siblings, Joseph and Sydney, just stole $7 million without a full team. As the police hunt them down, they meet at a diner out of town to discuss their next move. Joseph says they need to lay low for 2 weeks, but Sydney is worried about the time because she has a 6-year-old daughter, Steph. However, when she remembers the amount of money involved, she gets excited and decides to stick with the plan. Suddenly, they hear distant police sirens. They quickly leave the diner and follow their escape plan. Meeting in the woods, they change outfits. Joseph repeats the plan, hiding at a friend's farmhouse and using time travel to disappear. But Sydney is skeptical, saying the farmhouse doesn't exist. Joseph, however, is certain, explaining that his friend has traveled through time before. When they arrive at the farmhouse, they see a group of people outside, compromising their plan. This time, Sydney takes the lead, pointing a gun at them and demanding they leave. The group hesitates, but when Joseph backs her up, they drive off. The duo enters the farmhouse, carefully searching to ensure no one is there. The place is messy, but it's nothing compared to how their lives will look if they get arrested. Joseph notices that all the clocks in different rooms are set to 2 p.m. Police sirens echo in the distance, making Sydney nervous. She suggests ditching the farmhouse and finding a new hideout, but Joseph is drawn to a closet door. He tells Sydney he's found the door and runs to a clock in the sitting room, spinning its hands according to a notebook's instructions. Sydney gains confidence and does the same with another clock, both setting them to noon. As soon as they do this, the closet door swings open and they step inside. It's pitch black. Joseph lights a matchstick and tells Sydney to follow the instructions. She picks up an old telephone, waits for a click, then recites a spell and hangs up immediately. Darkness consumes them. Seconds later, they step out of the closet into the same house, but in a different time. Everything looks blue, and the place is spotless. Sydney turns to Joseph, shocked that it actually worked. Joseph confirms they'll be there for just 2 weeks, explaining that they have to wait until their past catches up to the present before they can return to the normal world. Exploring the house, they find it fully stocked with food and furniture. Their journey begins. For the next 13 days, Joseph and Sydney wander the neighborhood and discover a locked mill, but no people in sight. They spend their time talking, drinking, and playing games. On the eve of day 14, they reminisce about their childhood. Joseph apologizes for not being a better brother, admitting he wasn't there for Sydney during her troubled years. But Sydney is grateful, saying his toughness helped her. The conversation shifts to their mother and the music she used to play. Sydney hums a tune, lost in memory. Morning arrives. It's finally the 14th day, and they're eager to leave. Sydney packs her bags and heads to the closet door, only to find a mysterious package. Meanwhile, Joseph, burning some old belongings outside, notices the mill door is open and cautiously steps inside. Back at the farmhouse, Sydney freezes when she hears Joseph frantically shouting her name. He rushes inside, stopping when he sees a message on the closet door, directing them to the mill. Sydney demands a key, but when Joseph tells her there isn't one, she gets angry and runs toward the mill. Inside, Joseph hands her a flashlight, and they proceed together. Their first shock is a decayed body on the floor. Joseph notices an heirloom in its hand. It belonged to his friend, the farmhouse owner. He realizes his friend was killed. Moving deeper inside, they find a message on a podium. It warns them that they are in a time vice, a trap between past and future. The writer, calling himself Vice Grip Left, states they must choose to comply or be trapped forever. To prove submission, they must carve their signatures on the podium. Sydney, overwhelmed, runs out of the mill. She suddenly vomits blood and collapses, drained of energy. If she ever time travels again, she might just use a car. When she regains consciousness, she finds herself back at the farmhouse with Joseph. After a moment of crying, she calms down, and Joseph admits he no longer believes the farmhouse belonged to his friend. Instead, he thinks someone used his friend to get to him. He also suspects these people know about the stolen money. But Sydney doesn't care. She's willing to give up the money if it means escaping. The next day, they return to the mill. Joseph carves his signature, while Sydney watches for danger. Suddenly, a safe box appears. Using a code from the notebook, Joseph opens it and finds a tape recorder. The message instructs them to record their voices to begin a time cycle. Joseph obeys. A response follows. Vice Grip Left asks Joseph if he has told anyone about time travel. Joseph denies it. Joseph says they traveled through time to escape everything. Just then, Sydney snatches the tape recorder and asks Vice Grip Left if he wants part of the money, but there's no response. Instead, Vice Grip Left warns that the time loop is delicate and that he intends to erase them from existence. Joseph doesn't believe him. He argues that if they really wanted to kill them, they would have done it already. Instead, Joseph believes Vice Grip Left and his people need them for something. He demands to know what it is. Vice Grip Left responds that a visitor is coming soon, one that will bring destruction to the timeline. He wants Joseph and Sydney to kill the visitor. However, he admits that he doesn't know when the visitor will arrive. He promises to release them once the job is done. Joseph agrees, against Sydney's wishes. She's furious. Back at the farmhouse, Joseph explains that they have no other choice. The duo prepares for battle, taking shifts watching the horizon for the unwelcome visitor. But seasons pass and no one comes. 352 days later, they give up. Frustrated, they hold a meeting inside the house. Sydney presents old artifacts she gathered from the mill and explains her discovery. She believes that everything in this time zone comes from before the Korean War. She suspects that the time grip arrived after the war, lured people in, and wiped them from existence. However, Joseph and Sydney's unexpected arrival disrupted the timeline, trapping them here. Joseph, drunk and exhausted, dismisses her theory as ridiculous. This leads to an argument. Sydney blames him for their situation, while Joseph insists he would never risk the life of his only family member. After the heated exchange, Sydney comforts Joseph, and they spend the night side by side. The next morning, Joseph goes to the mill, lighting candles at a makeshift shrine. He records a message, begging for a way home. But there's no response. Meanwhile, outside, Sydney keeps watch, unaware that someone is watching her. A strange visitor in the distance observes her through binoculars, aiming a gun in her direction. Just as the visitor prepares to shoot, Joseph returns, shouting Sydney's name. She reacts just in time, dodging the bullet. The duo runs back into the house as the visitor keeps firing. Inside, Sydney tells Joseph to draw the visitor out while she targets him from inside. Joseph steps outside. He carefully calculates the visitor's position and sprints toward the buried gun. As he runs, the visitor fires, but the bullets keep missing. Joseph reaches his rifle and rushes back to the house, firing as he runs. But he soon realizes he only has one bullet left. He waits patiently, scanning the area for the visitor. Unbeknownst to him, the visitor, wearing a hood, creeps up behind him with a larger weapon. Joseph senses the danger and turns around. Meanwhile, inside the house, Sydney understands what's happening and steps out to hunt the enemy herself. Despite the falling snow, she spots Joseph's lifeless body in the distance. Heartbroken, she tries to shoot the visitor but keeps missing. The visitor shoots her in the hand. Injured, she runs back inside the house, believing Joseph is dead. Desperate, she bandages her wound and grabs a bull's hook, attempting to break down the closet door to escape. But as she destroys each barricade, new messages appear, warning her to be careful. Suddenly, the safe box appears. She picks up the tape recorder and listens. Vice grip left warns. If you break the door, you and Joseph will die. Sydney pleads with Vice grip left to let them go, but he refuses. He insists that the visitor cannot be left alive. When Sydney asks why, he admits he doesn't know. Frustrated, she recalls the visitor playing her mother's song. A strange thought crosses her mind. Could the visitor be her mother? Vice grip left immediately dismisses the idea. However, in exchange for information about what Sydney noticed, he agrees to share what he knows about the visitor. Meanwhile, Joseph wakes up in the mill with an injured leg. He sees the visitor fiddling with a tape recorder and silently reaches for a gun beside him. But the visitor notices his movement. Quickly, the visitor ties Joseph to a chair and communicates by writing messages. The first message says, "You will speak on my behalf." The visitor hands Joseph the tape and instructs him to send a message. Joseph asks, "What do you want?" The visitor writes back, "I want the man who killed my family." Meanwhile, Vice grip left is about to reveal information to Sydney when their communication suddenly cuts out. Turning his attention to Joseph's voice, Vice grip left asks, "Have you killed the visitor?" Following the visitor's instructions, Joseph lies and confirms the visitor is dead. He promises to bring the remains soon and requests that Vice grip left inform Sydney that he is at the mill. By the time Vice grip left returns to Sydney, he tells her Joseph has been abducted and is being held at the mill. Determined, Sydney grabs her weapon and heads out for battle. As she approaches the mill, she slips, making a noise that alerts the visitor inside. Joseph tries to free himself, but the visitor dashes out through the back door. Sydney chases after him, firing shots, but she keeps missing. Eventually, the visitor takes refuge in the farmhouse. Sydney follows and corners him inside. A brutal fight breaks out. Sydney attacks with the bull's hook, but during the struggle, she sees the visitor's face. She's shocked. The visitor is her daughter, Steph, now grown up. Distracted by the revelation, Sydney loses the fight. Steph overpowers her, covers her face, and attempts to escape. But as she runs out, Joseph stands at the entrance, gun aimed. Without hesitation, Joseph pulls the trigger. Sydney, in a desperate act, throws herself in front of the bullet to protect Steph. She collapses, bleeding on the floor. Steph escapes through the closet door, unlocking it with a key. Joseph rushes to Sydney, trying to keep her alive. He begs her to hold on, but Sydney tries to speak and fails. She dies without ever telling Joseph the truth about Steph. After mourning her, Joseph contacts Vice Grip Left, informing him that Steph is gone. Vice Grip Left tells him to wait at the workshed. Joseph buries Sydney and heads to the workshed, where he watches a video of Vice Grip Left and Vice Grip Right, a male and female duo, resembling a sci-fi version of Bonnie and Clyde. They hug each other and inform Joseph that they must erase him and Sydney from existence, starting from the day they were born. Vice Grip Left reveals that Joseph was never chosen for any special task. He was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. Vice Grip Right explains that they report to higher authorities, who will, in turn, report to even higher ranks. These people demand results, and the consequences depend on what those results reveal. Desperate, Joseph begs for another chance to fix his mistake. He insists that Sydney's death cannot be for nothing. Surprisingly, they agree. But they warn him he must eliminate the visitor and correct all his mistakes. With that, they send him back in time, to the morning he first met Sydney at the diner. Joseph, now aware of the loop, takes control. First, he tracks down his past self, counting money in the woods before meeting Sydney. He kills his younger self, dumps the body in the water, and takes his clothes. Then, he heads to the diner, waiting for Sydney. The waitress, recognizing him, is shocked to see his disheveled state. But instead of killing her as before, Joseph bribes her with money. Soon, Sydney arrives, with a gun. She immediately notices something is wrong. She asks, "Where's the younger version of you?" Joseph calmly tells her that he's dead. Enraged, Sydney aims her gun at him. Joseph doesn't resist. He advises her to forget the money and go home to Steph. He reveals the truth. He has relived this loop over and over, killing versions of his younger self, trying to save her. But he never succeeds. Joseph pleads with Sydney to end it. "Kill me," he urges. "Break the cycle." Overcome by emotion, Sydney pulls the trigger. The bullet hits Joseph in the head. As he collapses, Sydney runs outside, just as the police arrive. So that's it. Hope you enjoy the story. Subscribe and press the bell icon for more videos.